Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Alyssa Glass, and I'm a third-year law student.
And my name is Kelsey McNeil. I'm also a third-year law student. So for our project, we are creating a white paper about the federal funding programs and the benefit cost analysis that they use in determining which flood resiliency grants or projects should be funded.
Perfect. Yes, that clip was a great segue into what we're looking at. So we're looking at 3 different federal funding programs specifically. So FEMA, HUD, and Army Corps. And what we're specifically looking at is their benefit cost analysis, because for every federal grant, you need to have a benefit cost analysis to even be able to apply and be considered for funding. So we look at each of the factors that go into the different BCAs under the different federal programs, and from there we compare them through different case studies in the area. So Newport News, the City Line Apartments in Norfolk, we look at Chesterfield Heights, which is part of the Ohio Creek watershed, and the Norfolk and Lafayette River. And what we do is kind of study them in application, see how the benefit cost analysis differ, and then look to see kind of who gets funding, and specifically helping low and moderate income communities do this better, which leads into our recommendations where we give localities the ability to hopefully better be able to apply for funding under these federal programs, in addition to giving the federal agencies some guidance on to how to better give funding to these communities who need it more if that's something they're interested in doing.
So here we have a breakdown of the 3 different federal agencies that we're looking at and their basic overview of their mission statement and the purpose of each organization. After that, we go into the paper, the actual grant options that they have. Different programs have a couple different options, so we're looking into the way that they calculate their benefits and their costs to determine the BCA that goes into that. And so this is kind of the breakdown of the required BCRs, the benefit cost ratios that are needed for the different programs. For example, CORE generally requires just a 1 as a BCR, but because of restrictions on federal funding right now, Congress is usually only approving projects with about a 2.5 or up. Next, we're looking at the different issues that come with these types of benefit cost analysis and how they impact small localities in particular and low to moderate income housing. And then from there, providing the recommendations on ways that the communities could try to overcome those challenges, as well as recommendations for the federal agencies in the type of ways that they calculate the benefits that their projects provide to communities.
Hi, I'm Imani Price. I'm a third-year law student.
My name's Michael Jordan. I'm also a third-year law student. And yes, it's just like the basketball player. So our project is looking at eelgrass restoration efforts in Virginia and asking the question whether or not these eelgrass beds could be used to generate carbon offsets for sale in a voluntary credit market under, in this case, the verified carbon standard. And so eelgrass in Virginia, just as a little bit of background, up until the 1930s, Virginia's coastal bays and the Chesapeake Bay were full of these eelgrass beds that provide a number of ecological services. They served in part as a critical nursery habitat for Virginia scallops and other shellfish. But in the 1930s, they were wiped out by a combination of disease and hurricanes at that time. In the 1970s, one of our partners here, VIMS, began testing methods to restore eelgrass beds. And in the late 90s, they identified some populations of eelgrass that recovered in some of Virginia's coastal bays, and they started spreading those seeds to help restore the species. Another partner, the Nature Conservancy, joined them in this effort shortly after that, and together they've spread 72 million seeds into 600 acres, and now the eelgrass beds cover 9,000 acres in Virginia's waterways. And so one of the questions that we've been reviewing is could could the ability of these eelgrass beds to sequester carbon, could they participate, whether it be a nonprofit agency that is involved in restoring the eelgrass beds, could it be the state agency like VMRC, could it be the state of Virginia, could they participate in a voluntary carbon standard crediting system? So we've been looking at some of the different ownership issues related to these carbon credits. So a lot of case law characterizes the right to sell a carbon credit as a property right. And in Virginia, below past the mean low water line, the Commonwealth owns sort of the property. So we've been teasing out some of those issues, and not to bore you too much with the ownership piece, I'll let Amani talk about another challenge related to climate change in eelgrass.
Hi, so my section of the white paper, I discuss climate change and how it can affect eelgrass. I look at the effects on the population in the Chesapeake Bay and in the Eastern Shore, and I've discovered that through my research that heat is a real big problem in the Chesapeake Bay because you don't have the cold ocean water to come in and to cool down the temperature. So that causes diebacks in the Chesapeake Bay. And on the Eastern Shore, we see that sea level rise is becoming a problem for the eelgrass in that area because it's moving the barrier islands, and then you no longer have that protection against wave action and hurricanes, and the depth of the water goes down very deep, so then they no longer have access to light, and since it's a subaquatic vegetation, we know that they need a lot of light in order to survive. So I'm looking at that, and then also possible successor SAVs. I will be looking at an eelgrass in North Carolina that is actually more resistant than heat than ours is, and they actually reproduce annually. And also widgeon grass and shoal grass to see that in the event that if eelgrass dies off, we will have successor SAV to continue to sequester carbon. And also I'm going to analyze the capacity of marshes to sequester carbon just as another alternative. And then I'm going to look at the possible conflicts of SAV and trying to restore them with aquaculture, because we realize that sometimes if you have SAV in certain areas, you no longer can conduct aquaculture. So thank you.
Thank you.
All righty. Hi, everybody. My name is Mike Tenelucci.
Greetings, I'm Will Howison.
And we're both third-year law students as well. I think we all are here. And so our task for this semester has been to draft a white paper that analyzes roads in Virginia, which are both very important and turns out rather complicated as well.
So our project is actually a small sliver of a larger project between VDOT, VIMS, and the CRO. We're looking at the different strategies for sea level rise, land subsidence and recurring flooding, and how they affect new and existing roads in Virginia. That's the overall project. And so we're writing a white paper on pretty much like 5 aspects of that. To start, who owns what roads? Virginia has a very interesting road system. They have like primary roads and secondary road system, and then there's different public roads for the counties and whatnot. So our paper kind of breaks all that down and how that all happened with the Byrd Act in the 30s. And then from there, we talk about the different road abandonment procedures and discontinuance procedures, and they're all different based off of what kind of road, if we're looking at a primary or secondary or public road, or county road or something like that. So that's the beginning of our paper.
Yeah, and so it's obviously important, right? As in these coastal areas, flooding becomes more of a problem. Local governments are going to have to make the decision whether they want to continue maintaining these roads, whether they want to abandon these roads. And so there are going to be aggrieved property owners who have a road to their home, and the road is flooding, is covered in sand, is covered in X, Y, and Z. And so what we next kind of look into is, well, what kind of liability might local governments or the state be facing? The people who are responsible for maintaining these roads make a decision to abandon it. Property owners obviously get upset. So sovereign immunity is one big key component of this, where generally governing bodies enjoy substantial immunity from suit by they enjoy sovereign immunity. And so we look at under what conditions is sovereign immunity waived, so under what conditions might they actually face liability. So first we look at, well, what tort claims might individuals bring. So if someone suffers an injury on a road that has no longer been maintained, under what conditions can the government be sued there? Absent any statutory waiver, governments are generally okay. But more interesting is the inverse condemnation claim, which is essentially is a constitutional claim under the Constitution of Virginia, where property owner says that my property value has gone down because you abandoned this road. And so we are looking into how Virginia courts might opine on that issue. It's kind of an issue of first impression. It certainly seems like it could be a colorable argument, but we're looking at kind of seeing how liability might be imposed there. And we're looking forward to putting it out.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so hi, everybody. I'm Donnie Autry. I'm a 3L with William & Mary.
And I'm Benny Zhang. I'm a 3L with William & Mary.
And our project is the RAFT. So the RAFT is a partnership between us at VCPC, ODU, and UVA. And basically, the RAFT is an acronym, and it stands for Resiliency Adaptation Feasibility Tool. And I know that's a mouthful, but we're still keeping it afloat. And so on your left, you'll see our scorecard, and on your right, you'll see an example of a resiliency adaptation checklist. And so basically, what the RAFT is, it's a 3-phase process. And right now, Benny and I are working in the first phase. And so what the first phase is we are creating a scorecard. And essentially, we're going through like different comp plans and capital improvement plans at different locality websites, and we're looking at all the things that they do for resiliency. And we're making a scorecard with a bunch of different categories and giving them points. And so the points represent sort of what they're doing right and opportunities for improvement. And then the second phase, we meet with the localities, we present our findings to them, and we sort of get the message out of what their score was, like how it was compiled, that sort of thing. And then finally, we don't just abandon the localities, but we work with them in implementing their resiliency action checklists, and we help them throughout the whole process of implementation. And so now I'm going to give it over to Benny. He's going to sort of explain what the different categories are.
Thank you, Donnie. So what you see up there, you saw on the first slide an example of how we score with these scorecards. So in addition to being a student, I'm also an elected official on the Williamsburg City Council. So it's unique because with scorecards, when elected policymakers hear the word scorecard, we think of some sort of advocacy organization that's giving you an A+ or an F+ effort for this particular topic. But here it's different. And what we strive to do, and hopefully the theme that you can carry over with this, is collaboration. And you hear that often from elected officials, but I really do think the way that we structured the RAFT, it's indicative of a true collaborative effort. And the reason why is that the incentives are different. Here, our scorecards are about a checklist. So does your comprehensive plan, for example, cover some sort of resiliency efforts? Did it receive input from the community about coastal storm hazards? Have vulnerable populations been included in the emergency planning efforts? So these are all checklists and not exactly a grade that you're getting. And I think as all of us here are, when we like to get a checklist, we want to check the box off. So this is indicative of a true team effort, and we look forward to working with our partner localities. I don't know if we mentioned, we are working with the Northern Neck communities, in particular in partnership with the Northern Neck Planning District Commission. I don't know if they're here today. I think John Bateman's here. Thank you for being here, sir, and we look forward to the partnership. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.